Welcome back to the Two Promises podcast. Let's dive right into another exciting adventure with BD and crew as he pursues his new passion of one day finding the best, most epic bourbon. The Two Promises team sends their special thanks to Hobie and the Huckleberries for that masterful theme music. So grab a glass, relax, and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey, now I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth, smooth whiskey. No more wine. I like straight bourbon. Baby, you try the ride.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, rogues, wizards, sorcerers, swashbucklers, miscreants, cretins, recons, captains, and everything in between. Oh yes, and of course our loyal listeners and newcomers alike, welcome back. Super glad that you were patient with me. We had a few travel delays, but we are back recording. We are in BD Studios, but we're still recording as if we were BD Mobile. We're still working out some tech issues. We got a few upgrades with Black Friday and everything, so stand by. Hopefully we're going to have all of our audio issues dialed. Now, we're picking up with part 2 of what we started recording while I was in Medellin, Colombia. So we did a Spanish episode. I know I don't have the show notes up in Spanish quite yet, but we are working on that. Again, admin stuff is definitely one of my biggest weaknesses. So, what we have been discussing was the whiskey diet. Now, I want to clear things up. Whiskey is not an essential part of this lifestyle change, but since I kind of initiated it and whiskey is a central theme in my life, I'm calling it the whiskey diet. You can use whiskey or alcohol or not. That's besides the point of what we're actually functionally trying to do. Again, we discussed in the last episode, part 1 of this, where alcohol is more of a lubricant for a machine that's already kind of been utilized and in use, and I think there's also a lot of great things about alcohol, but that's the topics of other episodes. But right now we're trying to talk about how I'm using what I'm calling the whiskey diet, or this lifestyle change, to more gradually and more comfortably transition my body's primary and preferred fuel source from a sugar-based fuel source to more balance between fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, more in the form of fibrous vegetables, leafy vegetables, things like that. Less grains, sugars, refined sugars, carbohydrates. So we're going to get into that in a little bit more. So there's other ways to do this. Again, I'm going for simple. I'm going for not so incredibly difficult that it is not sustainable, and, as minimal suffering as possible. There's other things you could do. You could go on extremely long fasts where you completely, deprive your body of calories and nutrition. And those are great ways too. There's tons of studies on fasting via calorie restriction, via calorie completely cutting out, and how the benefits really of completely cutting out calories completely, if that's what you're going for, of getting into some of these more attuned spiritual states or whatever they were described as. I kind of forgot a little bit some of the lines of research there, but they also studied a group where they just restricted their calories, but they kept them with I think probably more of a grain diet. I don't really remember. It might have been rice, but either way, that's a little bit of a sidebar tangent. But my point is, you can go ahead and research fasting on your own. And if I find the time, I'll try to cite some of these studies. But, you got the Google machine as well. So we have other forms, other ways that this has been described in popular fads, diets, trends, marketing. AIDS is even just medical terminology is like ketosis. So like they're talking about the keto diets. So this is kind of a way of kind of doing this, but just maybe not exactly. But some of the principles are the same. So what we're doing is we're doing like I said, a more easy, gradual, graceful transition into a healthier, sustainable lifestyle. And we're going through the 80-20 rule. We're using the 80-20 rule so that we have some grace to mess up, but we also have boundaries that we're defining for ourselves that fit our own goals and our own lifestyles and what we're actually trying to get out of it. So that's what's going to help keep us on track for the long haul, in my opinion. And what we're doing is we're going on the basis of cutting out carbohydrates. Now, the thing about carbohydrates is they're very, very, very tricky because of the way that they are popularized, communicated, talked about, etc. So, for the purposes of this, and then we're going to get a little bit heavier into the exercise too, because I don't want to leave that out, because I did say that I was going to discuss this for all fitness levels and desires for activity. So, but let's get back to these carbohydrates. They're very sneaky. So I'm going to leave 2 different books in the show notes in this little area because I really don't remember which parts of what I'm about to discuss came from which book. They're both fascinating audiobooks to listen to or read, but I've been listening to them on audiobook. So again, we're cutting out carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates? So a carbohydrate, if you're looking at it in the nutrition world, the medical world, would be called a polysaccharide. So that just means a chain of a lot of sugars. If you really want to just simplify that term, I'm not going to get into all of it because that would be annoying and boring, and only the sciencey, nutrition-y people would really care to really hear all of that. So, well, a chain of a lot of sugars. Well, top of the food pyramid, it says no sugar. Sugars, we need to limit sugars. But if a carbohydrate down at the bottom where it's like all the grains and the breads and the pastries and the muffins and the donuts, and they say we can eat a lot of those, well, that doesn't make sense. It's almost like it's a sandwich or a cheeseburger, but it's just very confusing because whenever it's broken down, what you have broken down on your nutrition label as a carbohydrate or a sugar, I mean, they're both essentially the same thing once it hits your bloodstream through this digestive process. And it doesn't take as long as many people would have you believe, or popular science, popular understanding right now would have you believe. So a monosaccharide is really just a sugar at its core. And there's, I believe, again, one of these books, Grain Brain or Genius Foods, either way, if you're into nutrition, if you're into these topics that I've been discussing, you're going to get so much value out of those 2 books alone. So put them at the top of your list, Christmas list, whatever. You're going to love them. But there's so many hidden sugars. Now, before I go into this, I just want to talk about our brain. This is a quote from Grain Brain. Your brain, it weighs 3 pounds and has 100,000 miles of blood vessels. It contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. It is the fattest organ in your body, and it could be suffering this very minute without your having a clue. So that's how important your brain is and how magnificent, infinite, whatever you want to call it. So by having such a sugar-high diet, we are really damaging our brains in ways that I don't even understand. I don't think anyone truly understands. And maybe they do, but if they do, it's just not here in front of us right now. So, and again, these books are incredible ways of seeking for that. I don't know if I've finished either of them, but let's just keep going with this because, again, I've had some phenomenal changes in my life just by implementing a few of their information nuggets with these things that I'm just putting together from all of these sources that I've seen in my life and all my travels, and again, being able to work off of a food supply that could be varied and diverse and still maintain what I would consider, for me, my higher or peak-ish energy levels, fitness levels, clarity levels, etc. So again, there's 56 different names for sugars. So the O's is fructose, maltose, dextrose, All of those things, if you look on a label, they're sugars. So they're going to have a similar effect on numbing some of the receptor sites in your body, and also consequently starving your brain and depleting your brain of the nutrients that it really needs. And again, we talked about these things once they're being broken down, or by broken down actually in the blood vessels, it's like sandpaper. So if there's 56 different or more different oses for sugar, or names for sugar, and you're going to find them in just about everything: sauces, ketchups, spaghetti sauces, even peanut butter. Like, so high in sugars, and we just think, oh, that looks healthy, right? So be aware, be cognizant. You are working on greatly reducing those carbohydrates. Now, again, once you're in your windows, feel free to indulge, feel free to eat those things, because you are allowed to. That's why you're restricting those calories to those time frames. And in those books, again, you want to keep they're referencing a lot of really great studies where you really should keep your meals like away from bedtime, because your brain is going to be going through most of its regenerative processes, and it's not going to want to have to be bogged down by a lot of those digestive processes, by a lot of those hormonal changes, spikes, etc., caused by having so much sugar in the bloodstream. So if you're really, really, really looking to optimize, keeping them 4, to 6 hours away from bedtime. I don't know the exact window, but again, do some research on your own. I'm giving you some shooting lanes for you to go off of, with a little bit of depth, but also a little bit of breadth, so you can explore on your own and find what's going to work for you, because that is the key element, is finding what's going to work for you. You might not be trying to go super high-end, high-octane athlete. Maybe you're just trying to get a little bit more energy throughout the day. So again, I'm trying to speak to a broad audience. If I lose you in some of those medical terms, or I lose you in some of those things, that's okay. Listen to the main things about getting away from those sugars, right? Now we're going to get into the activity part. Oh man, I don't want to go to the gym. I can't afford a membership. I don't want to go try to look for weights. I don't want to make weights. Oh my gosh, how many push-ups do I have to do, or whatever it is. Again, don't stress about those things. Start small. At whatever activity level you're at, take a small next step. For me, honestly, this year, as depressed as I was and as hard as it was for me to get out of bed, it was do something a little bit more active than I would normally do. And so for me, that kind of started with just taking a walk in the morning, or whenever I could do it, and just getting out, getting some sunshine, moving my body, getting these pumps moving, right? Helping my lymphatic system and my circulatory system and my skin, absorb some of this sunlight and all of these chain reactions throughout my body that kind of were occurring. So start small. Just take a breath, take a breath. Just work on breathing exercises. It could be that small. It could literally be that small. That's been another passion of mine this year, is just working on breathing, and how that sometimes I feel like I can strengthen my core from the inside out, almost. Just different breathing exercises combined with yoga. And I don't know, I'm exploring some of these things. So these are exciting things for me, which keep my mind engaged. So the more senses that you can engage in this entire experience, the more long-lasting and the more positive neural pathway reinforcements you're going to develop. And all of these sensory things are just going to amplify, magnify, and just really keep motivating, fueling that fire, kind of like with our interview with Mr. Say. So do something more than I would normally do, and that's kind of where I started. And then eventually was, okay, well, I would see I had a couple apps, like a Fat Buster app, and I don't know, maybe that's what it was. And I would do some of those, and I would go through some of my old workouts that different people would write up. That's another good thing, is on your journey, just start taking notes of every exercise you do. And just, if you can centralize that, whether it's on an app on your phone, whether it's a notebook, whether it's a book of woe, whether it doesn't really matter, or a book of swole, again, have fun with it. Find motivational, encouraging ways to kind of give you that little peppy boost, whether it's a smile or like a war cry, and you know, let those things build that encourage you. And then again, like, you're looking at your phone, you're talking to people, you're seeing their motivation on Facebook because you're talking about your journey, you're putting that out there. Other people are catching wind of it, feeling it, that, like, that whole momentum rise, the whole tide rise. And so now all of this is just this communal bubble, this big bubble of just this more positive energy. So you're just letting yourself receive all of that because you've made those steps and you've taken those actions to give your body love, to, reset your body in a way that you believe is going to give you more energy and you believe is going to make you feel better, and actually take the steps. You're just going to create this positive cycle of, sustainable energy and excitement. Of course, you're going to have bad days, and that's okay. I'm not saying every day has to be a high. Every day has to be the best day ever. But once you start, what I noticed was, once my body started feeling cleaner, once I started feeling cleaner, once I started having more clarity of what was important to me and the action steps that I was taking to manifest those in my life physically by taking care of my health and, believing that I was important enough to take care of it and to take the time, regardless of whether I thought in my head or believed in my head that I had the time or not. But I was taking the time to invest in my body, to invest in my health, because I believed that that was important for my survival, that was important for my mental health, that was important for my ability to tackle the next challenges and obstacles that were inevitably going to come into my life. So just something more than I normally would. And by this positive cycle, I started saying, okay, well, let me do 100 push-ups a day. I'll just start in sets of 10 or whatever. I don't remember the exact increments. It's probably 25. But sometimes I'd incorporate them into other exercises. And as long as I hit that metric, I was good. And another thing that I've recommended many, many times, and I know this sounds maybe a little bit silly, but it's helped me get over some plateaus at times as well. And that is just before you take your bath or your shower for the day, or, your cleansing, whatever it is that you do, just 100 push-ups. That's your time. Or max out. If you really want to go hard in the paint, just max out. You do not get in that shower or that bath until you've maxed out on push-ups. And just see how fast you change your health just with that little thing alone. But also listen to your body. If you've been doing this a while, you're going to be more tuned to your body. You're going to understand the difference between pain versus an injury, just like, recovery, muscle soreness because of all of this. Basically, whenever you're exercising and you're working out, you're creating trauma within your body. You're breaking down tissues, you're ripping them up. So that's creating a lot of trash and metabolic waste. And then as they repair, you're also creating a bunch of trash and metabolic waste that needs to get pumped and flushed out, okay? And if your systems are not used to that, it's going to take them a little bit longer because they're not as efficient, they're not as used to it. But the more you practice, the more you exercise them, the more efficient they will become, and the more efficient your body will become, and then you're going to need a lot less calories and you're going to have a lot more energy, right? Because you're optimizing that metabolism, at least as far as I have discovered so far. So you also want to be careful to not overtrain, listening to your body, taking those breaks, making sure that you have those rest cycles. Again, 80-20 is a good rule of thumb for this as well. 4 to 5 days a week, and you don't have to beat yourself up an hour a day if you're wanting to, but like focused and intentional, not taking selfies, not whatever. I mean, unless that is your rhythm and your routine, and that is just your little bit extra. Again, I'm not trying to say exactly how to work out. I'm just giving you some options for different fitness levels. And again, knowing the difference between pain versus injury, and then a little bit of just some post-workout recovery tips. Again, rest, ice, compression, elevation. It's super simple. RICE. It's a staple. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. You can optimize your recovery. You can optimize, a lot of your sports injuries just by paying attention to that. I enjoy sleeping with my feet elevated almost all the time lately, or whenever I'm in a big recovery phase. So, rice. Rice. Super great thing to remember. Also, don't forget to stretch, don't forget mobility. That is my biggest downfall, my biggest weakness, and it's also been the thing that's created most of my trauma, injuries, etc. throughout my career. So it's like if I could rewind time, I would have focused on yoga a lot earlier. And again, that's been part of this year and my self-discovery this year and my growth this year is incorporating yoga and breathing and more recovery and more of those longer, like long, slow distance things to get you into out of those fight or flight type exercises, your CrossFit, your explosive things, and into those exercises that like really wear you down. Like a long, like just think if you're going out for a hunt and you got to travel a long time and you're on the road a lot and it's really wearing you down and grinding you down, and then you have your hunt. Or you're on the march, you're going out to this battle and you're already worn down, and then you have your big battle. So something along those lines, but way less dramatic. Way less dramatic. But again, having those recovery cycles, getting into yoga, feeling those stretching. And again, I had some weakness in my glutes, but I've had some really bad, I believe, back injuries because I've had back pain and mobility issues there. And I believe I'd been restricting my blood flow there because my lower back was strong enough to support a lot of fairly heavy lifts, and so were my legs. But it's almost like I had like no gluteal tone for whatever reason, at least not to reflect those metrics. Well, this year, once I got more into yoga and stuff like that, I started feeling a lot more blood flow in those areas, and I started feeling a lot more improvement, and consequently a lot more improvement in my overall form and function. So, do not underestimate the power of stretching. I'd like to give a shout out to my Shotokan instructor way back in the day, Bruce Hayes, I believe. Anyway, sorry, but butchered that. I apologize. It's been a long time, but my good buddy Dustin was told me he went back to the class and says that he is still lightning fast, looks like he hasn't aged at all, and he was really big on stretching. Most of our class, or at least a good 30 minutes, was stretching, and that's something that I really did let go over the years, and as I've gotten older, I've definitely regretted it. And he even warned me way back then. He's like, when you're young, everything's just so fluid and so loose and everything. But when you get older, the more you let it just tense up, you're not just going to be trying to stretch muscles. You're going to be trying to stretch tendons and ligaments and fascia and all this stuff. And, he might not have said all of those things, but I know he said tendons and ligaments. You know what I'm saying? And it is so true. So if you're starting fresh or if you're already in the grind, get some good mobility in, whether those are mobility WODs, whether those are yoga exercises, or your own individual full-on good stretching and mobility routines. Definitely do not underestimate the power of those things. And again, that's the simplicity of it. I know you've gotten a lot of information here, and I don't want to be overwhelming. So let's just break it down one final time to summarize at the base level just how simple it is to really truly revolutionize your health, be able to eat, because now I'll eat throughout the day. I don't feel as restricted to those windows, but I have healthier choices. I have healthier decisions in front of me, so I'm not as dependent on those high sugar sources of energy. And that gives me so much more freedom and flexibility throughout the day because my energies are not so erratic based on these cataclysmic shifts in blood sugar perceived demands and perceived shortages or whatever. So it's a little bit of pain up front, but all of the benefits on the back end are extremely worth it. So you just got to trust the process. You got to get through it. You're going to have your own different manifestations as your body kind of adapts and as your body kind of works through things. Again, common ones that I've seen is some really weird bowel movements and things like that. So just keep that in mind. And then as we go, I'll add more episodes where I kind of go more into depth in some of these individual topics. And again, your feedback is going to help me prioritize what topics more people are more interested in learning about, because I'm excited about all of them and I could talk about all of them for days probably. So, summary, goal, shift the body's primary fuel source away from sugars. How are we going to do that? We are going to slowly remove sugars as a source of fuel, and we're going to put other good, healthy, clean sources of fuel in their place that reflect our ideologies. So if you're not a meat eater, you're still going to need to find ways to get some of those good, healthy fats. Like I said, there's great alternatives. I personally do not believe that to optimize your health, completely getting away from meat and animal sources is the way to go personally. But again, I'm not trying to push an ideology. I'm telling you some things that have changed my life and how you can, even with your own ideology and your own beliefs on, planetary connections and, all of this, right? Avocados, all of your like sunflower oils, vegetable oils, you know what I'm saying? Avocado oils, olive oils. I just found these cold-pressed organic olive oils line, and I really enjoy them. And those are good for gargles, like I've spoken about before. They're good for cooking. They're good for just drinking, you know what I mean? There's some good nutrition in there. There's good fats in there, right? So you're moving a lot from sugars to some fats and your healthy fibrous vegetables, right? And for me, meats. So again, avocado and bacon with, lemon and salt. Boom. For me, that's super balanced. That's great for a snack or a meal to start working my body away from these sugars, right? And giving myself some grace with the 80-20 rule. I'm on it. I'm following it 80% of the time. 20% of the time, I fall off. I binge. I have a cheat day, I have a cheat weekend, whatever, but then boom, I'm right back up on that horse, right? So, and then the next thing is just do something a little bit more activity-wise than I normally would do. Hydrate a lot, drink plenty of water, and if you need to lubricate, if you need to get a little bit of stuff to kind of keep your energy, your body in the plane that you're needing to be in that flow that you need to be for productivity, for work, whatever it is that you're needing to accomplish to dominate your day, to take action, to take charge, and to accomplish your goals and meet those metrics that are important to you, right? Add the lubricants as necessary, but don't overindulge, So that's what I got for you guys this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. We're going to get this out and up as soon as possible, so maybe next week will be the Spanish episode of this. We will see. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope you got a lot out of this. Please, again, give me feedback. Would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks again, everyone, and have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. I'm super excited. Look forward to chatting with you all soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining us today on this curious roller coaster of life. If this is your stop, please exit peacefully and enjoy the rest of your day. If you're ready for another one, just push play. A final note before you go: thank you. And thank you for feeling. The distillation and aging process is different for everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're ready for, so please sip slowly and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth, smooth